just like patting the dog. So when you're drawing an animal or any kind of a fur, always make sure that you're keeping your eye out for two different color variations. Color variation number one is like they might not be natively pink, but because there's so much pink in here, it's that light that's falling on here and reflecting. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video will be a little bit different because today I'm doing a collaboration project with this cutie here. Her name is Rigby. Look at her, look at her, just look at her. Where are you going? Rigby, come back, come back. There she is, there she is. She's gonna get a treat, she's gonna get a treat. Yes. So today Rigby will model for us so we can learn how to draw dogs, right? Are you going to model for us? She'll do anything for a treat. And she did. Modeled us from photo shoot to catwalk. And here's the treat. Oh, and there was some competition as well, you know, as always in the beauty industry. Okay, let's get on with the drawing tutorial. So for this tutorial, you would need pastel mat. You can also use soft pastels, soft pastel pencils, an eraser. You might need that, you might not, but a putty rubber is very good smudge sticks. So to start with, I'm going to structure the dog portrait right here. I will use a stronger, brighter color like white, so that camera can pick it up so that you guys can see it. But if you are working on this at home, you can always go for something less visible like gray, because you are only doing it for yourself. Okay, so to structure the dog, I'm gonna go through my usual structure routine. I have a video on that on my Patreon page, so you can go over there and check it out if you'd like. So I will do it very quickly. So I'm just going over some of the things with the white pastel so that you guys can see a little bit clearer on the camera, because the gray is just not coming through well enough. Just some folds on the skin, the ones that are more prominent are the ones that I'm going to mark. The ones that are less prominent, you don't really have to do them. You know, we can get onto them when we are already shading. And you see, first we started with very vague sort of things, and now we're getting more and more into detail. The nose sort of bulges out a little bit, and then like things like that, you don't really need to mark them through, but sometimes it makes it a bit easier if you do. So you see, if you like to sketch things out in a lot of detail, then you follow through that process. But if you like to sort of roughly sketch and then get into every little detail once you're already using color, then I guess that can be a way as well. If I wanted to put the legs in there, what I will do is I will just keep them a little bit out of focus. Here I'm just marking through some areas of highlight and shadow, so there's a bit of a shadow here. Again, if you guys want to know how to structure things in detail, I go over that process in one of my videos on Patreon, so you can go over there and have a look. Otherwise, if I go step by step, it's like a whole other video. So a couple of folds, and here we go. Okay, so now that the sketching is done, I'm going to start working on shading and covering large areas with color. I'm going to start working on the background, not entirely finishing everything up, but just giving a little bit of that tonal difference for me to draw the actual fur against the actual dog against. So in some areas it will be a little bit lighter, in some areas a little bit darker. So a little bit of the cool color to push things back, but I will also use some warm ones as well, just for a bit of a balance. Cool thing about pastels is that you can also layer them up to create different colors, almost like mixing paint. Now I'm going to use a smudge stick to just give it a little bit of a blend. At this stage, if you're following along or drawing something similar to this with me, then you don't need to worry about completely blending things out. Even if you decide to do that, you can always do that later, because in the process, while you'll be drawing your subject matter, your main subject matter, you would probably find that you would need to introduce other colors in there as well. Maybe like darker or lighter shades. Okay, now I'm going to do a very similar thing, but to the dog. So I can see that even though her fur is black, there's still a little bit of brown coming through here and there. Well, usually with dogs or anyone who's furry and it's got dark fur, whenever of course they're exposed to a lot of sun, the fur starts to fade, and it usually fades into the reddish color, reddish shade. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply really dark colors, and I'm not working in detail at all at the moment. I'm just blocking in some areas, and I'm not going in fully, so that you guys want to make sure that you leave yourself a little bit of a leeway, a little bit of time to layer things up, to make your mind up about what you want to look exactly like, about colors and things like that.
If you love watching art videos, check out my Patreon page, where for just $8 a month you can find extra videos and in-depth tutorials and learn so much more in a calm and relaxing way.
Again, I'm just going to quickly blend some things in. And I'm just going to quickly blend things in. I'm going to use this to keep my hand clean. Probably not so much for smudging this, because this is at such early stages that it doesn't really matter if it gets smudged or not, but it's quite a good idea, just so that because that's really staining the stuff. Okay, I will also start using my pencils as well for that. Pastel pencils, and I'll start getting into detail. Because it's such an easy to smudge material, I will also be sort of focusing more on one area and getting it to the almost finished stage, and then moving on to the next one, and then at the end I can look over the whole thing and see if any additions have to be done. Dog's nose has a lot of texture, and it's also quite leathery, so it's somewhat shiny. I don't think it was really moist, but it's still it's still catching quite a bit of highlight in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the darkest areas first, and then I will work my way up. Now for a quick little smudge, you can still use your fingers, but at the same time it can be a little bit tricky to get into little spots. So something like a smudge stick or even an ear, sort of a cotton bud, could do the trick in little areas like this. And this is where, you know how I said we want to make sure that we work on the background a little bit later, because I can see here that the background is really dark next to the nose, and shading that in will really bring the nose up. So I need to go in and create that dark base for it. So now I can see much better how much lighter I need to go on the actual nose. There is also quite a bit of sky reflecting in some of the highlights, so I need to make sure that I use a little bit of that blue within those highlights. And now I'm already getting into the texture. I'm still not using white. This is like a light gray shade, so you really want to use white for the most strongest little highlights. And now going over with the black. And whenever you're drawing anything, could be some kind of a shadow or maybe a highlight or even a midtone, always make sure that you look into the color, because on one glance it might appear like it's just black or really dark brown or something like that, but when you start to really look into it, you notice that it actually has some other shades, like for example some blue or dark red or brown, or you know, any other color that sort of you can notice. You need to make sure that you introduce it in your drawing or painting if you're painting something. So now I'm going for the white. This is not the whitest white I have. I can always go white if I need to. And I will start working on the fur. So when you're drawing an animal or any kind of a fur, always make sure that you're keeping your eye out for two different color variations. Color variation number one is the natural color variation. So like this dog has a little bit of a white whisker going through. And then color variation number two is highlights that are created by objects around this animal, and the shinier the fur, the more visible it will be. By the way, for those of you who really want to see the, you know, that how to draw black fur and only focusing on that, I have a very detailed tutorial on that on my YouTube, so you can go and have a look at that. Make sure you always go with the direction of the fur. I'm working around the eye, but I'm not going into the eye at all. I'm gonna work on that separate, because it's a different color, different texture, everything very different. And that's why, you know how I said in the beginning, guys, you don't need to use such a bright color for outlines. As long as you can see it, that's fine, because then this process becomes much easier. You don't need to spend specific time to actually try and block what you've done there. The reason why I have to do it is that just camera doesn't pick up the, you know, the faint lines. So, and I want this to be visible for you guys. So yeah, so just make sure when you're drawing, you can use really faint lines. And now I'm smudging in the fur growth direction. Sometimes if you want to soften something but you don't want to smudge it out completely, you can just dab it with your finger like that. It softens the lines without smudging them or removing them. It's a perfect little tapping technique for if, for example, you've been working on fur and things like that, like what you see here. Looks like there's lots of red reflections on the fur right on top of the head. It's like petting the dog, pretty much. Very faint lines just to show the fur direction. Some fur highlights. And really bring out that light that's hitting the little furry bits on the end there. And lots of reddish brown as well. So I'll use this as my base color, and then I'm going to start around the eye, like for example the shadow on the inner corner. It's almost like a little triangle. Iris, now there's more shadow in here, and of course there's a pupil. Pupil is usually the darkest part of the eye, but sometimes there's so many highlights, especially in this case, that you can't really, it's not as obvious, you know. Mark some highlights on the lids, maybe some fur direction changes, you know, or anything that's quite obvious, you can mark that in. Now I'm going to work a little bit more on the inside of the eye, and because it's quite a small area, my fingers are a bit larger than that. Again, I'm going to resort to my smudge sticks. So I'm going to go over some of the highlights. Again, this is not the whitest I can go. I'm reserving the really bright shades. I can also see a lash line, so I'm going to put those little eyelashes through there. So now I'm going to go down to the ear area, and very similar, so I'm just going to be working on the fur, but there are in some areas I think where the fur kind of separates, you can see a little bit of the skin, so I'm going to use this sort of a salmony, light salmony color to start on the base, rather than say using gray. Even a bit more pink. And now I'm going to use the gray that is further away from that sort of a little parting area. And whenever you're working, always remember, if something looks like it needs to go lighter, always check maybe an area next to it needs to go darker, because you can change. If you keep making things lighter and lighter and lighter, you can change the color, so this dog will end up looking light gray. So always check that contrast there is it created because more light needs to be placed, or is it because you need to pay a little bit more attention to the shadows and the darkest parts. It's a very important tip, guys, so make sure you keep that in mind when you're drawing. I love dog ears, they're so silky. It's the kind of a thing where you can play with them forever. Not all dogs like that though. Take that. I'm talking from personal experience, but some dogs do love it when you sort of play with the ears. It's very useful to have colors that are not, that are quite light or quite dark, but not your maximum dark or light, because then when you work with this and you feel that you need to still add more, you can always go lighter or darker. And sometimes it's really hard to find those shades within one brand, so sometimes it's really useful to actually go in and find a different brand, because even though you are working with the same material, different brands do prepare them differently. So you might have another brand that has black, which is not that dark, and then you can use it as a really, really dark gray. And same with the white. Like for example, I use this white Primo, and when I got it at first I was disappointed with it because it wasn't bright on the paper. Like, it looks white, but when you use it, it's like sort of a not very powerful, doesn't give you that real bright sort of highlight. But then I thought, well, why don't I just use it, instead of the really light gray, and then if I need to I can always go back in with a really bright white. Things like that can work out in your favor at the end of the day. Okay, now going for some ochre and doing a very similar thing, so just putting some highlights that are just a tiny bit more yellowy. There, that's your fate if you love working with soft pastels. So now I'm gonna go for the little hairs that are just on the outside there. In this instance here, I'm just gonna go straight with a really bright white, because there are some really light areas, so this is the brightest white I've got. Okay, so the ear for now is done, and I'm gonna move on to the cheek and then the mouth as well. So now the mouth is quite a tricky area as well, just like the eye and the nose, and the reason for that is because there's so much information in there and so many things that have to go in the right place, because if they don't, it will not end up looking like the mouth. So just like with everything else, first we want to get a little bit of the base coat going. Now I will be using mainly my pastels, but if I'm missing on any of the colors from this, I will be using my block ones. And the reason for that is because it's quite a tricky area with lots of little things in there, so you really want to get into it with quite a bit of control. Now again, because it's really hard to get in there with a finger, I'm going to use the smudge stick. So the gums are kind of spotted, so there's a bit of pink, especially next to the teeth, But then we also have quite a bit of black as well, so make sure that if you have a similar situation, then you go for that in a similar way. Now I'm gonna go in with this matchstick into the gum line as well. And you see there are almost like little spots of dark pigment on the gums. So this is the time to really pay attention to all the different colors, because it looks simple, it's just a mouse, but there are so many different shades, different values, different. You really need to pay attention now. If you have, you know, a reference image, this is where you really need to study it. Because here you have not only highlights, but also, you know, different sort of patchiness in the skin as well. So you need to make sure that you are staying on top of all of these little things. And things like that, like they might not be natively pink, but because there's so much pink in here, it's that light that's falling on here and reflecting. And because gum line and lips are always quite moist, you get a really strong reflection. So not only the light reflection, but also the reflection of the color nearby. Now going for the really dark black to really create some of the dark shadows. Any areas that are a little bit too bright, you can always just gently tap on them with, like, say, having a little bit of black on your finger to tone them down. Okay, now before I move on to any more detail, I need to work on the teeth, because teeth don't have anything done with them yet. Now the teeth are quite yellow, so I'm going to use some ochre as a base layer, and then a little bit of that creamy white. Now, because this is quite a light color, on the teeth, I'm gonna go in with the lighter smudge sticks, or smudge sticks that are reserved for lighter shades. And now I'm going to brighten up the teeth on the areas where they are quite light. So now I'm looking at some areas that are not necessarily, you know, just around the mouth, but they are sort of connected, because, you know, you can see these folds on the skin. Okay, now there are some little details on the top here that I want to do now that this part is done. And that is those little lines. And these lines are just a little bit of the fur and also some whiskers as well. And I would like to do them now, so that then when I finish this area, I'm not going in here and smudging everything there. Okay. Any little highlights or, you know, light to darker areas that you might feel that you need to add, this is the good time. Okay, next I'm gonna move on to the body and pretty much do very similar stuff to what I did here with the fur. I will film it, but I will not be doing a lot of explanation because you kind of guys have seen what I've been doing here, so it's very similar. This area is even simpler, so it shouldn't take as long and shouldn't, you know, have as much sort of trouble as working around the mouth or things like that. So again, just going to go over some of the lighter areas. Always check what color you see as a highlight. Okay, now the only thing that's left is to do the collar. Now she's got this really bright, sort of a circular little tag. And another little tag. Okay, now if I pay a close attention to the image of the actual collar, then I would see that majority of the areas are actually blue, and only the outside part of it is, you know, has that pink pattern on it. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna work on the blue bits and then add the other ones in. Give it a bit of a smudge to really work it into the paper. And of course some highlights on the plasticky bits. And also giving them a bit of a smudge. Now there's some fur that's going over this area. and I'm not sure what. There's some kind of a writing here. This looks like a word dog, maybe. I'm not sure, maybe a pattern of some sort, but I'm just going to mark it as I see it. Some more highlights. Okay, now for the actual fabric and the color, I'm gonna give it an overall shade. And work with the pattern. And it looks like there's a little bit of blue inside these little rhomb-like patterns. A little bit of a shadow. A couple of more definitions and then it's done. So you guys, you can see that it's pretty much finished. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to look over the whole thing and add things that I think maybe I feel like would improve it or give it a little something extra. So let's have a look. So maybe just a bit more red, of that red color, and through the mouth. With maybe little things that I would have missed out or neglected or something like that. Okay, let's have a look. Maybe just a little bit of that pink. Just little hints of it. Now, I also feel like I want to have a little bit of green on the background, just a little bit. And now I'll give it a good smudge. And of course, if there's green, it will, be apparent, and little highlight reflections on the dog as well. You don't need to put much, just a little bit here and there. Okay, so now that all the touch-ups are done, the only thing that's left is to sign it. And this is done. So what I will do is I will spray varnish it and then to stop the real hard out transfer, because you saw how many layers of pastel I've actually applied, so it's all very movable. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up or subscribe if you haven't subscribed, because I'll be making more and more videos like this that are very educational and very relaxing as well. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to all of my patrons who are supporting me on Patreon. Your help means a lot to me, and for those of you guys who haven't checked it out, go over there and check it out, because you might find something really useful for yourself there. I hope you guys have a lovely day, and as always, thank you so much for drawing with me.